All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. I'll be joined here in a minute with Mark Givler, our recruiting analyst here at Buckeye Grove. Obviously, I wish I was here under better circumstances, but if you are not in a well or a cave right now, you've probably heard that Chase Young is suspended. Will not take part in team activities for the Maryland game, at least. We don't know beyond that at this point what's kind of going on. He made a statement on social media earlier today after the story had kind of gotten out there that he won't be playing this week because of an NC2A eligibility issue. Said that it was a mistake from last year by accepting a loan from a family friend he's known since before his freshman year at OSU, that it's been repaid, and he's working with the university and then NC2A to get back on the field as soon as possible. For initial reaction to everything that's kind of going on, let's throw it to our Mark Givler, who's been on top of this as well. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it doesn't appear that this is going to be something that comes out in the sum of tens of thousands of dollars or anything like that. A few thousand is kind of the term that's been thrown out to me. So I'm kind of operating under the assumption that, we might be talking in the $2,000 to $5,000 range when this all gets figured out. If that's the case, it seems like there could be some hope that this is just a couple game suspension and that they could potentially get him back. But definitely a dicey situation here, and you just don't know how the NCAA is going to operate. If there's one thing we know about the NCAA, it's consistently inconsistent. So we just, we can't assume, I guess, anything on that front. But, Ohio State certainly is going to fight for a limited suspension of 2 or 3 games probably, and then we will see what the NCAA decides on that. And obviously a big loss on the field, and then, obviously the timing of when he's going to be back, if he's going to be back, is obviously going to be important here with Penn State and Michigan coming up in a few weeks.
I mean, we don't want to sit there and say anything is good news or whatnot as we're in the midst of this, but I guess, if you're trying to look for something, it would have been very easy for him to say, to hell with this, I'm done, whatever, and just bounce. And it appears that he's trying to regain that eligibility and get back out there. So, I mean, there's something to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to try and read into his statement. I kind of posted this on our board here earlier. The whole point of that statement and any statements that Ohio State makes moving forward is to paint the best possible picture, the most positive picture. So to read in too much into that type of thing, I think, you may be kind of taking yourself off the cliff a little bit if you're not, if you're looking too much in the wording of how this is all going. But with that said, just the fact that he put the statement out would seem to indicate that he is focused on getting reinstated. And there were absolutely people I talked to last night and early this morning that were very concerned that he was simply going to not deal with this and just go to the NFL and just leave the program. Obviously under very different circumstances than Nick Bosa last year, but in that type of light of, why do I need to deal with this? And, I'm going to be worth $50 million, in 6 months. So it appears that he is on board with that. And that's obviously very positive if we can take him at his word on that.
And another thing to remember here, too, is that we're just a couple weeks removed from the NC2A working group coming out and making some recommendations in terms of name, image, likeness. And, Chase Young may end up being one of the last players under this current system to be facing something like this in terms of, not to lump it into some giant generalization of paying players, but for lack of something better, for compensating these athletes over and above cost of attendance and their full ride and whatnot. So, I think if we're looking here, we're in 2019. If we're in 2021 or whatever, this isn't necessarily as much of an issue because there's more of a vehicle in place for these athletes who, can profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And Chase Young, who arguably was not only the best defensive player in college football, but maybe the best player in college football, he certainly would have been eligible for some sort of compensation.
Yeah, I think one thing that could help Ohio State here, and that I would guess they are banking on helping them here, is the general landscape of society and media and everything else is a lot more sympathetic to this stuff. Going back to, I know people are going to try and tie this into the kid of Kentucky. I don't know if it's similar to that, but I look at Troy Smith. I believe that was 4 games he got early in his career for $500 worth of benefits. Obviously everyone remembers Maurice Claret. There seems to be a little more leniency, a little more certainly sympathy from outside influences, and that could potentially help Ohio State here. I think it probably will. So that's definitely something to look at. And then from there, it's like, okay, now what's the NCAA going to do? Because we just don't know. I mean, there are things that I see on a yearly basis that I think, wow, that's really not a big deal, and a school gets hit pretty hard. And there's things that I think, oh my gosh, that's like death penalty level stuff, and you don't hear about it again. So it kind of depends on, I guess, what they're able to determine. And Ohio State's playing ball here. We can kind of go back and forth on that if that's ever the smart thing to do, or I think the NCAA has lost some of its teeth here the last few years. So you never know, kind of, if someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed and wants to make a point or not. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of how some of these outside influences with the sympathy towards these situations evolving over the past several years. If this can maybe help Ohio State.
Right, just kind of talking about the uneven hand of the NC2A, and while it's a different department altogether, I mean, there's no uniformity in the transfer portal, and then, when you get to the penalties, and there was the story that came out in October about a booster in LSU and some very high dollar figures there, and it doesn't appear anything really has happened there outside of this booster getting 33 months in prison because of it. So you never really know where their mindset is at in terms of what it is that they're going to do. And even when it comes to penalties at places, the joke always is when a major program gets caught with something, you always joke and say, well, San Luis Obispo is terrified right now because they're the ones that's going to roll downhill to them, and that oftentimes that the Blue Bloods manage to avoid it. But for whatever reason, Ohio State always seems to be the one self-reporting, and a lot of other programs maybe go with a little bit of a different approach, especially ones south of Interstate 20, so to speak, if you know your geography pretty well. And I think there's a great debate as to what the approach is, but at this point, I don't think you don't know what the NCAA knew at this point, so you don't know if it was something that they already knew about or if it was Ohio State trying to be ahead of things. But you always kind of have to wonder where the compliance department is in the thinking of this, and that's not necessarily meant for me saying that the compliance department is doing this, that, or the other. But I know amongst a lot of the hardcore fans, they certainly don't agree with some of the practices that Ohio State's gone in terms of its own self-monitoring.
Yeah, and I think this move. It seems like this is more of a move for the other 84 players on scholarship, because at the end of the day, with or without Chase Young, this team is going to head into the week before Thanksgiving with a very real chance at making the college football playoff, competing for a national title. And, if you do report it right away, maybe, I'm not buying into vacating the games Chase has played in. I would be surprised generally, self-reporting this is going to keep you on the up and up with that in terms of, okay, as soon as they found out, they reported it. I think you get in trouble with that when you knowingly are playing guys who maybe shouldn't be playing. And so I think that probably factors in here as well, where it's like, okay, worst case scenario, Chase Young's done, but this team is still undefeated, and let's maybe not, penalize the other 84, and potentially put them in a situation where, everything that the rest of these guys have accomplished gets wiped off the books. So I think that probably has to factor in as well. And I think Ohio State's probably hoping that factors in as well with the NCAA, with the self-reporting.
Right, and just a final thought on that too. I mean, in Chase's statement, he said he repaid this loan last summer, but at that point, if he when that happened, if he became an ineligible player, he hadn't suddenly regained his eligibility. But I really do think a lot of that is worst case scenario and beyond worst case scenario, and I think this really just kind of starts and ends with what the status of Chase Young is. But, we're going to take a quick break here. On the other side, we're going to talk about what this means here in the immediate short term for the Buckeyes after we hear from our friends at Hague Water Conditioning. Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm Kevin Noon, joined by Mark Givler, and we are obviously talking about the big news of the day with the suspension and unknown status of Chase Young. Here earlier this morning, we got the status report, and we also found out that Jonathan Cooper is not going to be a go for this upcoming game against Maryland, meaning Ohio State is going to be without both of its starting defensive ends. And, with Coop, according to our friends at PFF, he's only had 70 snaps so far this year. He was injured right at the end of fall camp, is my understanding. Wasn't able to go early. He came back, wasn't able to play a ton, and now he's been back on the list for a couple of weeks. So, a very different looking line at a position that has, a lot of depth, but maybe not a ton of experience.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to, a lot of young guys. Tyler Friday and Tyreek Smith have had their issues this season with staying healthy. So, I think we're going to see, not that we haven't seen some of them already, but I think we're going to see a lot of Zach Harrison and Javonte Jean-Baptiste the next couple weeks, which I guess you could argue could be exciting. The fans kind of get a look at what the future of that position is going to be here, because no matter what happens with Chase Young, this will be his final season in Columbus. And, so we're going to get a more extended look with guys who, have played some this year, but are really going to be out there relied on, when the games are still close and early in games. And so it's going to be interesting. They've got great depth here, but Young is really the only total game changer. They've got a lot of guys who maybe are a year away from being game changers, but he's the one guy that, just can totally take over a game. And I don't know that any of the other guys are there yet. So it's going to have to be a collective effort.
Earlier in the year, we saw Jayshon Cornell slide back outside. Larry Johnson said he likes him on the interior line, but he definitely gives him some versatility and flexibility out there. What do you think about the potential of maybe moving Jayshon out, at least not necessarily full time during this point, but just as a little bit of a change of pace, especially with the depth that they have on the interior line?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's settled in very nicely at the 3-tech. And, I could see maybe some short yardage goal line. You want a little more of a stout front. You might want to go with a guy like Jayshon Cornell over maybe Zach Harrison, who's, still pretty long and lean and isn't really a short yardage, stop the run specialist at this point. I could see something like that, but personally, I would let the young guys go out there and get after the quarterback and see what happens. If it's clear that it's not going to work, it's clear there's some issues there, it's too much too soon for some of these guys, then maybe I would look at making an adjustment there. But I just think Cornell's selling pretty well for 3 tech. I think they've got a great thing going with that defensive tackle rotation, and I think look, these are highly recruited guys. Smith, Friday, Harrison were all top 100 recruits. Javante was a 4-star guy who was kind of late riser in the rankings. I think you have to trust your evaluations on those guys and trust Larry Johnson, arguably the best defensive line coach in the country, to get those guys ready to play. I would do as little tinkering with that as I could get away with. First, to sum that up in a sentence.
Fortunately for Ohio State, the next 2 games are not against the stiffest competition in the Big Ten, and that's not meant in any attempt to denigrate Maryland or Rutgers. Just the record will show it, just the amount of sacks they've given up, just a lot of issues at both of those programs. Rutgers is with an interim coach right now. Maryland's got a first-year coach. The Terps came out strong. They beat Howard, an FCS opponent, like 1,000,000 to nothing. I think it was 77-0, and then they went and they beat Syracuse, and everybody thought that Syracuse was going to be the team that was going to challenge Clemson in the ACC, and funny thing happened after that. Syracuse just kind of fell off a cliff. It's going to be that third game. It's going to be Penn State that's going to be the one I think that would really create a lot of the issues, especially with the mobility of Sean Clifford at quarterback and some things along those lines. But these 2 weeks, a lot of people were saying, the Justin Fields and the Chase Youngs and guys like that, they should only be playing a half. Do you feel that there's going to be more pressure on some of these other guys to perform in the absence? And and couple that with, Urban Meyer always talked about wanting an angry and a pissed off team. Well, this team definitely is going, even though, let's call it honestly, Chase's problem was self-inflicted. But, do you think this team really comes out, pissed off and angry because of, of the situation they're in? And they're definitely the pincushion of the college sports world today. They're taking a lot of shots.
I think that can work for a game. If it's the Penn State game and they've got to play without Chase Young, I think that can absolutely work for a game. As you look long term, it's hard to imagine them, as disruptive as Chase Young has been. It's hard to imagine just pure anger and motivation overcoming that when you've got to get a pass rush against Tua Tagovailoa or Trevor Lawrence, or you've got to, even the Wisconsin game. I mean, yes, that was a total domination by Ohio State, but Chase was such a huge difference maker in that game. It's not that Wisconsin would have won that game if not for Chase Young, but my gosh, that is not a 31-point game without Chase Young. I mean, he just completely blew that game up. And I think that's going to be a difficult thing to try and overcome if this is a long-term deal where we start talking about having to play 3, 4, 5 good teams in a row. I mean, they're going to have to beat essentially probably 5 top 15 teams in a row if they want to win a national championship. I think that becomes a tall task. But yeah, for a Penn State game, or even maybe a Penn State Michigan, if you're going to get Chase Young back at the end of the season, I think that can get you that extra juice you need to get over that 1 game or 2 game hump. And so to me, that's going to be the key here is the time frame of all of this. I already said I'm going to speculate anyway a little bit. I hate speculating about what the NCAA is going to do. Just kind of looking at this, I don't know that the optics are going to be very good if they say, well, you sit out Maryland and Rutgers, because essentially Ohio State was going to try and get away with doing that anyway. Chase Young was not going to be playing 60 defensive snaps against Rutgers. So I tend to think they're going to have to come together here for at least one of those big games at the end of the year, if not more. But we'll see.
You say you don't like to speculate about the NC2A, but I'm going to put you on the spot and have you speculate about something else here on our last question on the BIA podcast. Let's just say that Chase Young has to sit until either the Big Ten championship game, if that's there for them, or beyond that, but that he does come back. Can this team in its current iteration without Chase Young, knowing what we know about them, and, in the ball bounces weird ways, we see it each year or whatnot, can this team stay unbeaten and win the Big Ten?
I think they can, because I think, even though I think Chase Young's the best player in the country, I think whoever holds the number one pick in the NFL draft in the spring is going to be insane to not take him. They still have difference makers at other levels of their defense. Jeffrey Okudah is a difference maker. I think Malik Harrison's a difference maker. I don't think there's many linebackers playing at the level Malik Harrison's been playing at basically since the end of last year. So I think they can get by teams that maybe don't threaten them on both sides of the ball the way Penn State, Michigan, and then we see, who knows? I mean, maybe Wisconsin again, maybe Minnesota, there's still a couple teams over there in the West, but I don't see offenses that will strike the fear in your heart the way Clemson might with all their weapons, the way Alabama will with receivers that, probably shall be playing in the NFL right now. So I think they can manage this. They're going to need Justin Fields to be the man. I mean, they're really going to need even a little bit more out of Fields in that offense, I think. Because I think you're going to lose some of those, talk about explosive plays on offense. I think you're going to lose some of those explosive plays on defense, those strip sacks or, big third down, stops, those plays where Chase just blows everything up and forces a bad play. You're going to lose a lot of that, I think. But I think you can play enough defense against the teams they're going to be playing the next few weeks to get themselves into the playoff position. But it's not going to be easy. I think Penn State's going to be an interesting challenge. And just the Penn State-Michigan dynamic back-to-back is interesting to me. You got to get up at home for Penn State, then Michigan. You really got to stay focused. I mean, it's really going to be tough, I think, to focus week to week with all the stuff they're going to have going on with Chase and with the different opponents they could potentially have from Penn State, Michigan, and Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they lose an offensive possession or two because Chase Young would get the opposing offense off the field that much quicker, whether it's a sudden change in terms of, a strip sack or something along those lines, or just a quick 3-and-out and whatnot. So I think that while I don't see Ohio State really stumbling along the way through the rest of the Big Ten schedule, while, the challenge will be more real in games 11 and 12 with Penn State and Michigan, I think that they still are balanced enough on both sides of the ball. They're balanced enough offensively with run and pass. They've got, an NFL secondary. They've got much improved linebackers. They've got a much better scheme. So I think that it's all there in place. And, just based on everything that I've heard from people that I've talked to and whatnot, I would really be shocked if we saw something that went more than 4 games, which would get Chase back in time for a potential Big Ten championship game against Minnesota, Wisconsin, what have you, whatever out of the Big Ten West has to offer at this point. But we don't have all the answers right now, but it's something that we will be keeping an eye on here at BuckeyeGrove.com. And I want to thank Mark Gibler for joining us here on short notice, as we wanted to get this podcast out quickly. And be sure to keep it locked in at OhioState.Rivals.com, BuckeyeGrove.com for all the latest news as we continue to follow this story. And we'll talk to you right after the Maryland game tomorrow with our regularly scheduled BIA podcast. Thanks a lot.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcasts Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.